The Miami Dolphins have received their flowers from an ESPN poll that polled NFL players, coaches, and executives about the top talent across the league entering the 2023 season. Who made the cut? Who didn't? Who was snubbed? All that today here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. Today is Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with Joe Marino. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Dolphins your first Miami Dolphins listen of the day. Shout out to our everydayers who do make it a daily routine. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts daily, because it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. Now, today on the show, I wasn't planning on doing this content, but the latest series, courtesy of Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN, that dropped with safeties, prompted me to touch on this. This was the latest development. I think a little bit of a surprise for the Dolphins, but a lot of the conversation around the Miami Dolphins as a football team is on the offensive side of the ball, where you obviously have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Tua Tagovailoa with the offensive explosion when all three of those guys were on the field at the same time, plus Teron Armstead. We talk a lot on this show about cornerstone players and quality starters and the impactful players that the Dolphins have on their roster. And I think that there's very little question with this nucleus of the team being built by a coach who at the time was a defensive background. The defense, I think, is very robust in talent, and I think it's more well-rounded in its talent than the offensive side of the football is at this stage, although the impact players on the offensive side of the ball may carry more of an individual impact on the football game. But to see the league, and this is courtesy of Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, he is polling executives, players, coaches, and scouts, and releasing throughout a series the 10 best players, according to those polled players, coaches, executives, and scouts, at each position in the NFL. And seeing the Dolphins get their flowers here was really eye-opening to me. And it's not necessarily a big surprise when it comes out that Jalen Ramsey was voted by all of those people in the league as the third best cornerback in the NFL, behind Pat Surtain, the second, also relevant to Dolphins because, of course, of his dad, and Sauce Gardner, last year's Rookie of the Year defensively for the New York Jets. It's Jalen Ramsey, and then you get Jair Alexander, Darius Slay, Marlon Humphrey, Marshawn Lattimore, Trayvon Diggs, Denzel Ward, A.J. Terrell. That's the top 10. Honorable mention, the first on the honorable mention list, Xavier Howard. Dolphins, according to this, and it's those in the league. This is not just fan opinions or us as a Dolphins fan opinion. It's nice affirmation to know that the way that we on this show and over on Locked On NFL Scouting evaluated the Dolphins roster, the league views those players in the same fashion. And obviously Jalen Ramsey has a level of versatility that I think expands beyond that of Surtain and Gardner. At this stage in both Surtain and Gardner's careers, they're both outside corners that are locked down. They change the math of the game because they're going to eliminate potentially an entire side of the field by just playing lockdown. Now, Ramsey has done that in the past. When he was in Jacksonville, he was very, very good at that. But he has kind of graduated and matured, where I think you would say Jalen Ramsey is the most versatile corner on this list of the 10 best corners in the NFL. And for him to be the kind of athlete that he is, the size of the athlete that he is, and to be able to have that claim, it's a great place for the Dolphins to be. But that's not really a surprise, right? We knew Jalen Ramsey was a mega addition when he was acquired by the team. We knew Xavier Howard has ball hawking tendencies, but did not play his best football last year because he played through injury last year and is getting closer to that mythical age of 30 for NFL cornerbacks, where you wonder how well he can age. But I think this is a system that will position with Vic Fangio him to age as gracefully as possible and play with eyes in the backfield and utilize his playmaking ability and his instincts in coverage. But then you get to safeties. And this is what made me do the show today. I'll read the top 5. Steelers, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Yeah, former Dolphin. Okay, relevant for the Dolphins there. Derwin James, Los Angeles Chargers. Denver Broncos, Justin Simmons. Arizona Cardinals, Budda Baker. Miami Dolphins, third-year safety Javon Holland. Voted 5th by players, executives, scouts, and coaches in the entire league in safeties. And for the Dolphins, who have been a team that we generally go through this time of year saying the Dolphins aren't getting enough respect. People are sleeping on these individual players for the Dolphins. And I think there are players on the defensive side of the ball who did get snubbed in this exercise. But for Javon Holland to come in 5th in a year in which he was less around the football than he was the previous season, his rookie season, because he had to cover for all of the injuries in the Dolphins secondary, I think is a great testament to Javon Holland and what he has put on the field for his film resume at this point in time. And of course, the athleticism that he brings, the hitting power that he brings, the range that he brings, the instincts that he brings, and knowing that he's in a defense where he's not cleaning up everybody else's messes on the back end anymore, and he is going to be put in a position to make more plays, you can't help but get excited. And I was just very surprised to see executives, players, coaches, and scouts, courtesy of this article from Jeremy Fowler at ESPN, to put Javon Holland in front of proven players with year over year over year over year of top-end production and Pro Bowls, like Jesse Bates and Kevin Byard and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Williams, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Quandre Diggs. Holland getting a nod over those kinds of talents, it kind of makes me more excited for Javon Holland. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know how much more excited for Javon Holland I can be in year 3. Because you sense the fit that takes place, and you acknowledge the physical profile, and you acknowledge how good he's been in his first 2 years, while also acknowledging he hasn't always been put in position to make plays because the Dolphins have needed him to protect the defense from areas of weakness. So it was very cool for me to sit down, look at this, and say, oh, wow, Javon Holland was voted as the 5th best safety in the league. If you have any question about the caliber of Javon Holland as a staple of this Dolphins defense, let that guide you. It's not just players, coaches, executives, scouts, the full gambit of all the people who are the prominent roles to play within the league. 5th best safety in the NFL consensus is Javon Holland. It's pretty cool. We're going to continue talking about the back 7 here next on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. But before we do, our partners at eBay Motors have partnered with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're preparing for a draft, and it is draft preparation window for many of you right now, or scouting the waiver wire, every week we are going to be providing you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has for us this week on our eBay's Guaranteed Fit fantasy picks of the week. When on the clock for the first overall pick in 2023 fantasy draft, it's okay to get downright giddy and do the gritty. This would be my personal choice out of Vinny's propositions for the first overall pick. Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, guaranteed fit for your fantasy football roster. The production speaks for itself. He is on a historic pace to start his NFL career. Over the last 2 seasons, Jefferson led the league in both receptions and receiving yards. He will remain a number 1 dominant target monster in passing games. So if you are PPR or even half-point PPR, the volume is going to be there for sure. Jefferson is a guaranteed fit to ignite the rest of your fantasy football lineup towards winning success this upcoming season. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle are right at your fingertips, so you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. They'll make sure that you have the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you find and understand exactly the parts that you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you'll always know that you are set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, get the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So the secondary, the Dolphins have 3 players, and that does not include Kader Kohu, who I think can be on that pathway as a nickel player. I think he's versatile enough to play anything you want him to play. And Brandon Jones, I think, is a bit of a step down from kind of that stratosphere of the top 15, 20 safeties that have been mentioned, but still, nevertheless, I think he's an adequate starter in the NFL. So no surprises for me there. However, you go to the defensive front, and we got another Dolphins player that's got some flowers. And it's a player who, as recently as 10 months ago, some Dolphins fans were worried about this player being a hit for the team. Jalen Phillips, honorable mention, 10 best safeties, 10 best pass rushers in the NFL. Here's the top 10 list. Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Hassan Reddick, Max Crosby, Brian Burns, Matthew Judon, Von Miller, Joey Bosa. Also included in honorable mentions included Aiden Hutchinson, Trey Hendrickson, Khalil Mack, Cam Jordan. So here's what I want to do with Jalen Phillips. We're going to put our objective hat on as best as we can. And I want to acknowledge who on this list I would rather have over Jalen Phillips. And the top of the list is pretty easy. It's Bosa, yes. Myles Garrett, yes. TJ Watt, yes. Micah Parsons, yes. Hassan Reddick, I think, is a skill-specific type of player, but I do think his sack production and consistency as a player does speak for itself at this stage. He warrants that as well, as does Max Crosby. Max Crosby is one of the best pressure producers in the NFL right now. Miller and Bosa missed time last year. Matthew Judon was excellent from a sack numbers standpoint. But Jalen Phillips, I think, is more physically talented than Matthew Judon. I think he's more durable than Joey Bosa and probably more durable than Von Miller. I think when you factor in age and longevity, it makes it very easy to say I would rather have Jalen Phillips over Von Miller for the next 5 years. And hopefully it's a lot longer than 5 years for the Dolphins with Jalen Phillips. I would probably vouch for Phillips over Brian Burns. I think the parallels between Phillips as a player and Brian Burns as a player, as far as the development for Brian Burns versus when the sacks actually came versus the pressures, I think is meaningful. And I think Phillips is going to stay on that same trajectory. And that means we're going to get to a point here in 6 months where Jalen Phillips will have answered that question of, oh, well, what's his sack ceiling? I think there's eight or nine edge guys that I would rather have over Jalen Phillips. But Jalen Phillips would be in my top 10, but case in point, coming off of 2 consecutive seasons in which he's grown from the start of the season to the end of the season and entering into year 3 where we expect big things, he's already getting honorable mentions, which surprised me because I think the low-hanging fruit would be to say, well, he hasn't had double-digit sacks yet. Well, yeah, the film don't lie, right? And for coaches, executives, scouts, and players to piece all that together and have respect for Jalen Phillips, to put him in honorable mention when I think he's only going to continue to get better, I think is excellent. Now, I don't have the same leniency for what we got with the interior defensive line. Jalen Phillips was honorable mention. So too is Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins did not crack the top 10. Here are the top 10, according to Jeremy Fowler's polling of players scouts, coaches, and executives. Aaron Donald, yeah. Chris Jones, Chiefs. Jeffrey Simmons, Titans. Quinnen Williams, Jets. Javon Hargraves, 49ers, free agent signing this year. Dexter Lawrence, Giants. DeForest Buckner, Colts. Daron Payne, Commanders. Cam Hayward, Steelers. Jonathan Allen, Commanders. Honorable mentions, Christian Wilkins, Vita Vea, Kenny Clark, Derek Brown, Leonard Williams. Okay, yeah. I'm not going to argue with you on Donald, Jones, Simmons, Quinnen Williams, Javon Hargrave. And I think the Cam Hayward disrespect is a little much, putting him ninth. He's a stud. I would put Cam Hayward sixth behind Javon Hargrave. So then you have Dexter Lawrence, DeForest Buckner, Daron Payne, John Allen, pair of Commanders, interior defensive linemen. For me personally, I think you can make a strong case for Dexter Lawrence because he did have the sack production breakout last year. DeForest Buckner's been a consistent penetration type player, really, really good versatile defender. Daron Payne, though, you can miss me with Daron Payne over Christian Wilkins. I would probably put Christian Wilkins in the same tier and bucket as Buckner and Jonathan Allen. And I guess Dexter Lawrence would also go in that bucket as well. I don't think any of the guys in the honorable mentions with Christian Wilkins should be in front of him with Vea, Clark, Brown, and Williams. Vea, when he's healthy, is a really rare athlete. Kenny Clark is, I think, the player who Christian Wilkins compares most equally to for his impact versus also kind of a lack of pass rush production that you might get strung up on. And I know one of the executives that was referenced in the article said that Wilkins was the best player the Dolphins had when that team played against the Dolphins this past season. So somebody certainly has enough respect there. And obviously he got some votes, but he would crack my top 10. He would not crack the top 5, but I do think he would crack the top 10. And if you're hung up on 3 plays throughout the course of a season, which is the difference between having 4 sacks and 7 sacks, and 7 sacks would put him in that stratosphere for you, like, I don't know, like, it's such a small amount of reps to me to have such a meaningful difference in dividing and tiering these players. And then in the back, the second level, this is where the Dolphins are completely void of representation. So they had representation at defensive end, defensive tackle, cornerback, and safety, which I think is right. I do think the linebacker room has upside, but it is a little bit more of a high floor, maybe not as high ceiling as some of the other players that are on this list. Here's the players who did make it, and then some of the honorable mentions. Fred Warner, yes. Roquan Smith, okay. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, win for the Dolphins that Edmonds is on the Bears and no longer the Bills. Devin White at 5 is surprising to me. He would not be on this list, especially in front of Demario Davis and Shaquille Leonard, who are the next 2 names, Nick Bolton, CJ Mosley, Dre Greenlaw. Honorable mentions include Bobby Wagner, who went back to Seattle, Levante David from the Bucks. He's the better Tampa Bay linebacker in my mind. Olakun with the Jaguars, monster tackle production. Logan Wilson with the Bengals, and Patrick Queen of the Ravens. I think you're starting to get into the stratosphere with guys like Olakun, Logan Wilson, Patrick Queen, that like David Long's kind of in that same conversation. The challenge for David Long is he hasn't played full seasons. So I understand why he's not represented there. Just being objective. So I think they got the secondary, I think they got right. The Jalen Phillips ranking at this stage, I think is appropriate. There's a few guys that I would rather have Phillips instead of, who made the top 10. And then Wilkins, I think is 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 9 in the defensive tackle rankings. So little snub for Christian Wilkins in my mind. We'll see what happens this year. We have some odds and ends. Actually, one big thing of odds and ends that we want to get to next here on Locked On Dolphins. We know who's on Hard Knocks. It's not the Dolphins, but it is Dolphins relevant because the New York Jets was announced from ESPN's Adam Schefter this morning on Wednesday, July 12th, will be on Hard Knocks, the New York Jets. To which I say, good. I'm glad. I can't wait to get the inside the building, intimate experience of getting to know the New York Jets with Aaron Rodgers as the new starting quarterback of this football team and all of the expectations and all of the big media Super Bowl picks and so on and so forth. It's very telling that nobody wanted to be on the show. Nobody volunteered, which means the league said, okay, we're going to choose for you guys. In which case, we're going to take Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, and you guys are going to be on Hard Knocks. And that decision being passed down, I'll never forget, I believe it was J.J. Watt, who said when the Dolphins were on Hard Knocks, he picked up the snap count by watching the show. If you don't think that players across the league can't glean little extra insights into the mechanics of a team and how they work by having cameras and broadcast in there throughout the course of the season, I don't know what to tell you. Now, I would also say this selfishly, I would love to see the Dolphins on in the coming years for the content. But if the content comes at the cost of potentially winning football games, you can miss me with the content. I'll take a divisional rival who has massive expectations and a coaching staff that, in spite of the progress that they made last season, is probably in a little bit of a hot seat situation. Like, for all the flowers that everybody wants to give the New York Jets, they finished in 4th place in the division again and won 7 football games. 7. Now, granted, that's more than they won in the last 2 seasons before that combined, but nevertheless, there's got to be a little pressure. Oh, by the way, you traded for an almost 40-year-old quarterback who was talking about retirement going into the offseason. With that amount of pressure, with that amount of newness, with that amount of distraction for the Jets, this is going to be a very crowded playoff race. And I, for one, am completely here for all of the insights that may allow other teams to win in the margins against the Jets just enough to change just a little bit of the trajectory of that final record so that when we get to the end of the road, that is one less team that Miami potentially can say we are going to be in front of in the standings. I'm here for the content. Look forward to talking about it. Look forward to bring you all kinds of insights as we get ready for training camp here. Just 2 weeks away, start of training camp. So we are ticking down very, very quickly to the start of training camp, which is why you want to make sure you keep it locked in with us here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I'm Kyle Krabs, your host, lifelong Miami Dolphins fan. Shout out to the everydayers who are locked in with us on a daily basis. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Make it a great rest of your day. I will be back again tomorrow with more Dolphins football because, as we said, it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. Fins up.